Yoda. The name alone sounds like wisdom carved into stone. The green sage who trained heroes, battled darkness, and spoke in riddles that sounded like prophecy. But what if I told you that Yoda's greatest strength, his patience, his discipline, his serenity, was also what doomed the Jedi to extinction? For centuries, Yoda was the mind behind every major decision the Order made. He was the voice of reason, the one everyone turned to for guidance. But over time, that guidance stopped leading anywhere. The galaxy evolved, the politics shifted, and the dark side didn't hide. It adapted. Meanwhile, Yoda sat still, waiting, meditating, watching the Republic decay, one Senate vote at a time. The truth is, Yoda wasn't timeless. He was outdated. And the worst part, he didn't realize it until everything he built had crumbled into dust. His wisdom had turned into routine, his patience into paralysis. The Jedi were collapsing under the weight of their own traditions, and Yoda was holding the roof in place, thinking he was saving it. It's a harsh idea, imagining the beloved Master Yoda as the architect of his own downfall. But look closer. The Order that once protected peace became a military machine under his leadership. The Jedi who once sought enlightenment became politicians in robes. And all the while, Yoda believed that waiting for balance was the same as creating it. It's tragic, it's ironic, and it's painfully human, because sometimes even the wisest among us mistake stillness for peace. Yoda didn't lose because he wasn't strong enough. He lost because he refused to move forward. In this video, we'll explore how Yoda's wisdom turned into weakness, how his leadership aged out of relevance, and why the greatest Jedi of all time needed to walk away, long before the galaxy forced him to. Yoda's name carries weight across galaxies, but sometimes wisdom can become a cage. For 8 centuries he trained Jedi, advised politicians, and guided the fate of the Republic itself. Yet by the final days of the Clone Wars, the very qualities that once made him great became the reason everything fell apart. Yoda was still wise, but his wisdom was built on a world that no longer existed. He was teaching lessons for a galaxy that had already moved on. The Jedi Code was his Bible. Discipline, detachment, and obedience were his commandments. And for 1,000 years, those principles worked. The Sith were extinct, peace was maintained, and the Jedi were comfortable. But comfort was the problem. The galaxy was evolving, politically, economically, technologically, and the Order's teaching stayed fossilized in the same old patterns. The Force hadn't gone quiet. The Jedi just weren't listening anymore. Yoda's focus on serenity over adaptability left the Jedi blind to subtle corruption. The Senate wasn't some abstract evil force. It was a network of people learning to manipulate power in ways the Jedi couldn't comprehend. While Yoda meditated on balance, Palpatine built an empire right under his nose. That's not ancient evil rising from the shadows. That's bureaucratic rot feeding on spiritual arrogance. Even his stance on emotional detachment became a slow poison. Jedi were forbidden to love, to grieve, to form attachments, because emotion, supposedly, led to the dark side. But Yoda's own life proved the flaw in that logic. When he finally lost everything, the Order, the Republic, his students, his grief was unavoidable. The very emotions he told others to suppress were what finally made him human again. The irony is brutal. The greatest Jedi Master of all time taught everyone to transcend emotion, yet his biggest failures were emotional blindness. He didn't see Anakin's pain as human suffering. He saw it as weakness. He didn't recognize the Senate's deceit as betrayal. He saw it as destiny. Yoda's clarity became tunnel vision. By the time the Clone Wars erupted, he was still fighting battles like it was the High Republic era, teaching lessons about peace, while sending troops into endless war. The Jedi became generals instead of monks, soldiers instead of philosophers. And Yoda let it happen because he couldn't admit the galaxy had outgrown the Order's old ways. When he finally faced Sidious, it was too late. His duel wasn't just light versus dark, it was past versus future. Sidious represented evolution, however twisted. Yoda represented tradition, however noble. The fight was unwinnable before it even began, because one side was learning and the other was reminiscing. Yoda's retreat to Dagobah wasn't just exile, it was symbolism. a literal embodiment of an old teacher fading into myth, surrounded by swamps of decay. The galaxy didn't need a ghost, it needed a reformer. If Yoda had stepped down decades earlier, passed the torch to someone like Qui-Gon Jinn, or even Mace Windu, the Jedi might have had a chance to adapt. But instead the galaxy was guided by an old master who could sense the future, yet refused to change the present. And that's how wisdom turned into downfall. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Yoda didn't just fail because he was old. He failed because he couldn't let go of control. The Jedi Council, under his leadership, became more like a corporation than a spiritual order. Meetings, politics, and empty philosophy replaced intuition, compassion, and curiosity. The same curiosity that once led Yoda to seek enlightenment now led him to stamp out anything unorthodox. Think about Qui-Gon Jinn, one of the few Jedi who actually listened to the living force instead of the Council's rules. Yoda respected him, but never trusted him enough to lead. That's telling. Qui-Gon wanted to train Anakin because he saw something special. A prophecy. A spark of destiny. Yoda saw risk. To Yoda, control was safer than faith. And that's how you end up with a galaxy full of safe decisions that quietly doom everything. Yoda's obsession with order became his biggest weakness. When the Jedi started serving as generals, he justified it with logic instead of morals. He told himself it was necessary, even noble. But the moment the Jedi picked sides in a galactic war, they stopped being peacekeepers. They became extensions of the Senate's corruption, soldiers fighting under the Republic banner while pretending to be neutral monks. Yoda's control also meant denying change. He preached patience to Anakin when action was needed, and calm when chaos was necessary. There's wisdom in restraint, but not when it becomes cowardice. Yoda couldn't see that his advice was moulding broken people into obedient soldiers instead of complex individuals. Anakin didn't need a master, he needed a mentor. And Yoda never learned the difference. The council under him wasn't democratic, it was theatrical. The Force is our ally, they said, while voting on issues like senators. Every voice was heard, but Yoda's voice was the one that mattered, and everyone knew it. When he sat in silence, the room followed. When he spoke, it was law. That's not balance. That's quiet dictatorship. Even his lessons to Luke on Dagobah reveal the same flaw. He still couldn't admit that attachment had value. He told Luke to abandon his friends, to let them die for the greater good. And yet, Luke's emotional defiance is what saved the galaxy. In that moment, Luke succeeded because he didn't listen to Yoda. That's the tragedy of wisdom. It can outlive its usefulness. Yoda's legacy became preservation instead of progress. He guarded the flame so tightly that he smothered it. The Jedi didn't evolve because their leader feared imperfection more than extinction. And when you fear imperfection, you stop learning altogether. Control gave Yoda comfort. But comfort isn't clarity, it's complacency. And the Force doesn't reward those who sit still. It rewards those who adapt. If Yoda had been willing to trust others, to embrace imperfection, maybe the Jedi would have become something greater. Instead, he built an ivory tower in the middle of a galaxy on fire. And when it finally burned, he watched from the ashes, calling it destiny instead of consequence. By the end of his life, Yoda wasn't just old, he was obsolete. And that's not an insult. It's a warning about every system that refuses to evolve. The Jedi Order collapsed because it was built to last, not to grow. Yoda mistook longevity for success. He thought survival meant victory. But the galaxy doesn't reward what lasts, it rewards what learns. What makes Yoda fascinating isn't his power, it's his guilt. On Dagobah, he isn't meditating in peace, he's rotting in reflection. He knows he failed. His students are dead, his order gone, his legacy rewritten by the very Sith he once destroyed. The man who trained generations of heroes became a ghost telling riddles to a farm boy. It's poetic, but it's also tragic. There's a painful honesty to his isolation. He once sat at the heart of galactic politics, now surrounded by fog and insects. That's not wisdom. It's consequence. And maybe that's why his advice to Luke feels different. He's softer, less commanding, more haunted. He finally understands that knowledge without empathy is meaningless. What Yoda represents is the burden of legacy. When you've led for centuries, you start mistaking your survival for relevance. He couldn't see that stepping down would have been the wisest thing of all. Passing on leadership isn't weakness, it's foresight. But he held on until the end, because he couldn't imagine a galaxy without him in charge. Even the Force itself seems to mock him. When he fades into the netherworld, it's not triumphant, it's melancholy. The music swells, yes, but it's not victory. It's relief. The old master is finally at peace, but the galaxy had to die for him to realize his mistakes. If he had left the council centuries earlier, the Jedi might have redefined themselves. They could have embraced emotion, understood attachment, and evolved into something closer to balance. Instead, they became relics reciting mantras, while the galaxy burned. Yoda didn't see it as decay, he saw it as duty. And maybe that's the most human thing about him. He wasn't evil or arrogant, just tired. Tired of changing, tired of loss, tired of pretending his way still worked. Sometimes leadership isn't about fighting, it's about knowing when to stop. The tragedy of Yoda isn't that he failed, it's that he outlived his own relevance. His wisdom was meant for a peaceful galaxy, not a political one. And by the time he realised that, the light he guarded for so long had already gone out. Yoda didn't need to die on Dagobah. He just needed to leave the council before it was too late. Because sometimes, even the greatest masters have to accept that the Force moves on without them.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.